the importance of how the younger generations, particularly teenagers, I've heard that they get the majority of their sex education from pornography, which is not even real, okay, and not how women work and not how we're supposed to work. But to you, it's very important that you teach your daughter connection with her authentic self. And you talk about how it was important for you to help her learn that pleasure belongs to her. Her pleasure is her own, and it originates with her. And it's not for someone else to give. And that you mentioned that if girls knew their own bodies and their own pathways to pleasure before becoming sexually active, they would not end up feeling that they are dependent on someone else for the way they feel, and that they're somehow wanting because an insecure teenager who is otherwise ignorant deals with their own insecurities by telling so. So this is brilliant. Okay, what is your message to the parents that are raising the younger girls and boys to learn about their authentic self, their sexuality, how sex is supposed to be, not like it is in the 1 hour movie, wham bam, thank you ma'am. What would you like us to know about educating sexuality in reality?
Well, I think it all begins again with being present with your children, really being present with them, being part of their lives, being real, taking the time to be a part of their life. Now, I do see in our culture that Hollywood, I would say for a certain age, and it starts pretty young, that Hollywood is what tells us about sex and what it's like. And yes, it's generally from a male perspective. They don't have a lot of time for sex scenes, so it's usually pretty quick. Everything's heightened and dramatic, which is not always the way it is in real life. And so what I mentioned in the book is that that was one of the last things I tried to screen in terms of content for my daughter as she grew up. Aside from, she could handle heavy emotional stuff if need be, or, a little bit of violence. But I did try to keep the Hollywood sexuality out to whatever extent I was. And we use sex to sell everything. So there's only so much that you can keep out. Because I think it sets up unrealistic expectations. And then as we become sexual, we never have an opportunity to know what's real for us, what's authentic for us, what we would even like to be able to experience it or ask for it or create it with a partner. And boys are equally, ignorant in that sense as we grow up. And there is a larger and larger population of young boys that are kind of growing up on pornography, and it literally changes their brain. We know this. So not only does it become an addictive behavior, but it also becomes very unrealistic in terms of what they might experience in a real sexual encounter. And everything seems kind of, it doesn't get the high that you do with pornography. So that's not to say teenagers are going to necessarily be interested in hearing that. And I will say that, when I began to talk to my daughter about these things, it was like, mom, later, stop it. But I think the message went in, even though, they're interested, but they can't really let you know that they're interested on some levels. So I've just tried to really help my daughter focus on knowing herself, and that I recognize that she's different than me and going to make different choices than I do, and honoring who she is rather than, trying to fit her into any kind of particular social norm. And she's 25 now, and she's a human being, and she's full. And I'm so happy to, see her living the life that she's living. But I do feel that we look too much to other outside sources for telling us what it should look like. And so many women spend their whole time during a sexual encounter kind of self-observing, am I positioned so that I'm not going to look fat, or
Yep.
am I giving the kind of response that is expected of me? And we do need to find our own pathways to pleasure if sex is going to be authentic for us.